Hello, lovely community. You have Angelica and Rachel here, and we are so excited to have Luna from the Aluna Method on the podcast today. Welcome to the podcast, Luna.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm so grateful and excited to be here.
We could not agree more. So, we're going to jump right into this. And we'd love to ask you, what was the catalyst for your journey of connecting to your spiritual self and to the moon?
My catalyst to this journey was, I would say, my curiosity and my search for meaning and depth. And I always felt connected in a way that I thought it was very unique. My journey has been very I had an awareness since I'm very young of my spiritual body, my presence in this world. And so I just felt called and I felt inspired to go deeper into what the meaning of life is and how I came in to serve. That was my motivation.
I love that. And I've heard you talk a little bit on other episodes about your quest for belonging, which maybe was coupled with your curiosity. And I would love for you to dive into that a little bit more, what that felt like, and ultimately where that led you on your journey, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually.
Yeah, you know, in that same breath of not really fitting in because I was this really connected child and I always felt this divine presence around me. I was always very like connected to that divine presence. So in that same breath, belonging in society was kind of difficult for me because I just didn't understand how people would exist and be against one another and compete. Like the nature of competition was just like such a foreign concept to me. And so I just said to myself, if I ever grow to be this selfish or this focused on division, which to me was what competition meant, um, and trying to be better than others, I just can't do this. I just don't want to do this. So, feeling it like you belong is a very it's a very long journey. It came from that place of also longing for equality, longing for justice. And as a Black woman in the world, that even at a young age, in Brazil, I mean, I'm from a diasporic context. Um, that was very, that was also denied in my life. I had to be a certain way because if I wasn't that way, I wouldn't get jobs. I had to speak a certain way because if I didn't speak a certain way, people wouldn't value me. I had to show up a certain way because if I didn't show up that way, I wouldn't be recognized. And I'm like, wow, I have to do all these things in order for people to see me as a valuable presence. So it became clear that I was, kind of like um like an outsider in the whole thing. And even my mom, she would look at me and be like, where the hell did you come from? Like, you're so weird. Like, and I was just like, I don't know, mom. It's just it feels just feels different to be here. And I want to know where I would feel like I'm safe. I want to see that place. I want to experience that place. I want to see a place where I feel safe and I feel welcomed and I feel loved and I feel happiness. And I knew what that felt in my body. I knew what that felt in my experience. I just didn't know how to find that outside in the world, because all I saw in the world was like like the antithesis to that, what I was looking for. So
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense that you were searching for that connection and that longing, and you found it in something that we're all so deeply connected to, whether you realize it or not. And that thing being the moon, and also just, all aspects of our earth. But I know you specifically are really drawn to the moon in that way. So will you talk a little bit more about connection to the moon and how you came to cultivate that connection?
yeah, moon love, it's a different kind of love. It's a love that encompasses all of you, because it connects to the nurturing safety of beingness. Like it feels like, the dark and the light are coming together to to lull you into an experience of ease within yourself. So your relationship with your own time in space completely transforms. That whole, that whole idea of like go 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 go, do 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 do, starts to be super. Sorry, did you hear a buzz?
Yeah, no worries though.
Okay, good. That whole experience of like doing in order to gain value becomes completely, you know, uh, um, foreign. It's removed from your experience. So now you are in a place that is so familiar, that is so nurturing, that feels safe, because you are tending to your own time in space. So it's like you really become the center of your experience, and everything else around you is shaped by that awareness. So it's like coming home. Being connected to the moon is like coming home, and it answers so many questions that we might have, around what am I doing here? How do I remember my mission? How do I remember my purpose? Once you are connected to that sense of self in time space, which is your own, and you are the creator and the creatrix of that experience, it's like the experience of being God. It's in front of you. It's tangible, and then you touch it, and once you touch it, you become one with it. There's no separation between you and God anymore. So that's where I found peace. And I tell people this story because it's such a lived expression of that mood love. um, Me and my mom used to have this really awful relationship because, ancestrally speaking, my family from my mother's side had this imbalance within women in the lineage. So the firstborn woman was always, always had a difficult relationship with the mother. And then that happened to me and my mom, which also happened to my mom and my grandma, which also happened to my grandma and my great grandma, and so on and so forth. My great grandma also had that with my great great grandma. So at one point, but in my experience, I was like, wait, this is weird. Why is it that since I'm a child, I have this friction with my mother? Like I remember looking at her and like wanting to like kick her, like I was so mad at her. And I said to myself, after I understood what that was, I went through therapy and all that, but it didn't really helped me, because even speaking about it was just on a cognitive level. Of course, it makes sense, and you start to like break things apart. But until I actually felt it, until I actually was able to release and forgive myself and really go through the layers of my own experience, that's when I started to have a relationship with my mom that had no filters anymore. That like that filter of in dissatisfaction and pain and anger wasn't present anymore. It started to dilute as I did the work within myself. So it was a very, nowadays me and my mom are great. We have long hour conversations. I go visit her and I stay with her for like months at a time. And you know, even my siblings are like, wow, really, you guys really work this out. And I'm like so grateful when people outside of the relationship see it, right? So that's because the moon being that mother archetype, it really helped me see things within myself that needed to come into balance. And therefore, myself, me healing myself, I started healing the generations before me. I wasn't trying to change my mother. She's still the same person. You know, she's very Christian. She's very devoted to her faith. She's the same person. But what changed, what transformed was the relationship I had with myself. Once I started really feeling safe in my body and feeling supported by my ancestral forces, that started to shape and shift my life in ways that are fully um, just supportive. That's, you know, that's the word I have for it. I feel supported.
Yeah, that is so beautiful. And just you speaking about the moon, it makes so much sense because we are starting to study Vedic astrology, which is understanding where the moon is just that you described is the mind, it's the emotions, it's the relation to mother. And it's really interesting experience last week, and a message that came through was healing the mother wound. I think this is like more like a new age concept of speaking it from that, but it's basically just ancestral wounds that can be passed down, and specifically with a mother. I mean, that is our mother. Of course, we're going to have those. And, you know, it's really interesting that I was actually home with my mother last week experiencing this. And what triggered me before was just like happening on a less level because I had done that internal work, because I had healed that relationship with myself, just like you said, that I understood where she was coming from. I could hold my mother with compassion and love rather than triggering it. I had already healed it within me. So then I wasn't necessarily seeking for her to already be healed. I healed
Mhm.
myself. And I feel like that like distinction is so key when healing. And I love that you pulled in that you saw this happening throughout your lineage, because I think that is it's enough. It's just to have that awareness is like, okay, I can take the blame out of myself if there's something that I did in this lifetime. I'm so curious to hear if you've had any communication with your grandparents or anyone on your ancestral lineage about this.
I spoke to, you know, I spoke to my grandmother, my great grandma, everyone. It's already in the ancestral realms. My side sometimes comes to, you know, visit, but all I hear from her is keep loving. And you know, like her messages to me are very, very specific around self-love, which is so beautiful, and faith as well. She was so full of faith. um but on my mother's side, there was not really, you know, because my mom and my grandmother still have that issue themselves.
Mm.
They haven't been able to, you know, um how do you call it, overcome this challenge between them. um and it feels like everyone has their journey. You know, it feels like their journey is to be whatever it is that they need to work between themselves, that is, you know, to up to them to decide. But the fact that I have like I have created like I severed some sort of like, not curse, but like a dysfunction. I severed a dysfunction in my family lineage, and from, you know, starting with me and the next generations after me, um, will have a different understanding. Will carry a different algorithm, so they can, you know, develop their own relationship with mother in ways that are centered in compassion, centered in self healing and self forgiveness, and also relating to them as humans, right? It's like they yes, they brought us into this world, but they're also people in their own right that are figuring things out and might not have the best tools to actually, you know, live life in a way that actually was, how do you call this, supportive, I guess, of whatever it is that we think we needed at the time. So I always look at her and I'm like, you know, my birthday was in April, and I called my mom and I said, Mom, thank you so much for bringing me to this planet, and thank you for doing everything you did, you know, good and bad, because it made me the person I am today, and I'm very grateful. I love myself. I'm very happy to be in this body at this time. So thank you. And she was, you know, very receptive, and she was like also touched by that. So yeah.
This may not be something you have thought of yet, but if you ever plan to have children and maybe have, you know, firstborn daughter of your own, have you thought about how that will translate in that way? So not only breaking more of like the energetic tie, but also is it the way that you maybe show up for her and think about your relationship with her, knowing that you've been on the other side of that coin too?
Yeah, I definitely feel like that's gonna be something I have now. And also passing down this, right? This is why I think so many of us have this mother wound, as you mentioned, Angelica. You know, the mother wound comes from that place of not having the traditions that supported us for thousands of years, passed down generations, and used as technology to help us, yes, you know, evolve and walk with awareness of self, awareness of the relationship between us and, you know, whatever it is, whatever energies are, um, supporting us within our lives. um, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, oh, you know, now that I have this information, it's like a rite of passage. It's like an initiation that I can pass it down to my daughter and to my son, because being connected to the moon is so special for every single living being in the planet, right? Man, woman, boy, girl, a tree, fish, anything alive is relating to the moon in their own ways, which is so powerful. You know, there's fish, for example, that only hatch in certain moon, they hatch their eggs in certain moon phases. Ocean tides are moving along with moon movement. Trees are communicating in their own ways, and whenever the moon is a certain way, you know, there's things that happen in the sap goes towards the top and it comes back towards the roots. It's like there's movement happening according to this lunar presence at all times. So we as humans, we must recognize that and say, okay, let me see what it means, and how can I become attuned to this wisdom too? Because I mean, everyone else is, you know, got the memo. why we just like ignore, we got the memo, we ignored it, we're like, oh well, let us do it whatever, however we want, and clearly it's a bit of a shit show. So
While you're on that note, Luna, will you go into some of the techniques and traditions that you use and the kind of templates that you found really work in your life for connecting to this lunar force?
I am staring at a turtle now. She just came out of the pond and she's walking up well, I'll try to turn you around just so you see her. Can you see her crawling down there? This little black dot crawling up.
I love turtles. I'm such a big turtle fan. I have a pond by where I live and I go see them almost every single day with my dog.
Yeah, that's so sweet. I've never seen turtles here, so I'm so excited that she came to bless us today. If you're into animal medicine, look up turtle and see what that brings for your day. Actually, there's an animal medicine book here, so I might be able to read that as well. So the traditions I studied are connected to Yoruba, Brazilian, Afro-Brazilian traditions. The mythology around it is what I use to inform my methodology. And that mythology is, you know, very rich. We have so many stories around the goddesses, you know, Oshun, Nana, Ewa, Yemanja, Oya. All of those goddesses are aspects of the Great Mother. And I feel like, you know, whenever we talk about spirituality, we always think about the Hindu tradition and yoga and meditation. And a lot of people, I mean, like both of you, going to study those traditions. It's really beautiful. But there's also a certain, you know, how can I say this? Devaluing of traditions that come from the African continent as something that is of less, you know, importance, or is primitive, or is, you know, considered as, you know, black magic and juju and evil, right? So it's very interesting because when you look at mythology, you know, in the Hindu traditions, in the Greek traditions, they all are speaking essentially of the same archetypes. And when you bring in the African mythology in it, it's also exactly, you know, it's very much in the same understanding. It's a basis, it's the basis of human psyche being interpreted through stories, through cultural different lenses that are bringing knowledge to people. And so this is why I chose to create this methodology using my ancestral traditional philosophy, because I want the world to recognize African philosophy, African mythology as something sacred, as something divine, as something that is highly valuable, and it's considered one of the most advanced technologies in the world. So that's where I draw my inspiration from when I do this work.
There were so many good nuggets in there. And I think what you say is really important because I think, like you said, so many people know what yoga is and they understand kind of the basis of Hinduism. But what's really cool, and there's an underlying thread in between all of these things that, like, it's basically just understanding who we are as human beings. And the beautiful part is you can bring it to life in a way that speaks to you and your story and maybe your people and your ancestral lineage. And I think that's powerful and important because you need more people from my perspective, studying more of themselves and learning about themselves. Because in the same way that you shared the story about you and your mother, it wasn't necessarily learning about your mother that healed that wound. It was understanding yourself and how to love yourself and how to cultivate that inner wisdom. So I think that that's really beautiful. And I'd love for you to share how that kind of manifested in the expression that today is the Aluna Method and what that looks like.
Um, you know, the Aluna Method is a technology in itself. When I was giving this, another thing about me and this, creation of mine is that it was given to me. It wasn't something that I like read in books or, you know, saw in any school of anything. I started to connect with myself in ways that were, you know, to support my self love, my self value, and in that process, my ancestral um, reckoning came about. It was a gift from my ancestors. In 2015, I was invited to go on a trip to reconnect with my ancestral roots based on a DNA test that I took, and that test revealed that I am of Yoruba descent, and I participated on this project called Brazil DNA Africa that brought me back to Nigeria, and we filmed the whole documentary, and that documentary was bought by BBC at the time, and it was aired all over my country, and that created a whole new perspective for Brazilian people because most of us Blacks in Brazil, which is more than half of the population in my country, we could never really find ancestral reckoning because our documents and archives were all destroyed, burned, or are hidden from us. So there's a lot of collective pain in that in that regard, because it became almost like an impossible quest. It became almost like, okay, I don't know, and I can't know where my ancestors come from. I know that somehow they came from the African continent. I know that somehow they managed to generate some sort of like stability for themselves. And I'm not even going to say wealth, because in Brazil, you know, the economics of my country, and the social structures still keep Black people in a lower category when it comes to, financial advancement. So people were just like, okay, how can I do this, right? And then at that time when I presented that understanding of like, okay, we can do this through a DNA test. We can do this through searching for something deeper within ourselves that is still activating, our connection to the African continent. People like started to completely change in and look for their own just their own bridging of that gap. So they changed perspectives, and it became a movement of just like people looking for their roots. So I felt very inspired during that time, and it took me to this place where I received the information. Like, I was taken from Brazil, dropped in Nigeria, got to this place called Oshun Oshobo, which was where the heritage protected heritage site, temple sanctuary of Oshun, which is one of the major deities in Yoruba culture. She is the goddess of the rivers, sweet waters, right? She is the mother, the fertile fountain of life, um, and beauty, and just sweetness. So Oshun took me there, and I got there and I was like, what is this? I have no idea of what's happening to me. My body was shaking and my energy field was just receiving all this information, and I was like, gee, what is happening? I felt so activated, and that's when I started remembering all of this information. It just dawned upon me that this is where the integration comes, right? It's about masculine and feminine coming together, light and dark coming together and expressing themselves in their full expression, and dancing this dance of tug and pull, and give and receive in a way that is nurturing for people. So that's what I organized. Those messages were the ones that I started organizing in the form of actual concepts. And I used different references that helped me, create a walk through the process. And that walkthrough was not for me, but for the ones that need to connect to that wisdom as well. So that's how it all happened.
That is so fascinating. As you were speaking, I was like, yes, I mean, it has to be channeled through her. Like that is how it has to be received, because especially when we don't have like the things that are written down. And I even think that's the highest form of intelligence, because when we have things written down, the mind can distort it, right? Because we
Mhm.
ourselves are not necessarily like these clear conduits. We have to deal with a lot of things in this earth world. So I think that that's so profound that Source chose you and your ancestors chose you to channel the Yoruba philosophy. I would love to hear kind of like the basic tenets of what the Yoruba philosophy is. I'm sure you've kind of already infused this whole podcast with it, but just something that our listeners can really start to understand of what this spirituality is like.
Well, Yoruba spirituality is actually embedded in everything they do. It's a science, right? It's an understanding of life as a reflection of nature. So nature is their main source of learning, of knowledge. Um, so all of these deities that I'm speaking of are actually nature forces. And when as a human, have connections to specific nature qualities. For example, if you're a woman that feels at home when you're in the ocean, it's more most likely, and I'm not saying this is a truth, or I'm not making any predicaments, but it most likely Iemanjá is close to you, right? Iemanjá is informing you of something, or caring for you in that moment of your life. And Iemanjá is the goddess of the ocean. So she is the representation of the ocean itself. Um, so there's like people in Yoruba culture, they have an understanding of nature as the ultimate healer, as the ultimate teacher, as the ultimate nurturer. And if you have a relationship to nature, then everything in your life prospers, because it's like you start to understand oneness with nature. um, and you do everything in order to preserve that oneness. You don't want to hurt it. You don't want to sever yourself from it, because you know that that causes disease. So that is basically um, how Yoruba people see the world. And it's a very intricate, complex system. You have a person that is, qualified and studied for many years to interpret an oracle, and that oracle is it's a tray, a circular tray of wood, and it has all this like powder in it, and the circular tray normally has this carvings around it that represent the continuous movement of the universe, and the actual bottom of the tray represents the cosmos itself, and this powder on the tray is the infinite possibilities of all the stars in the galaxies. And when this priest or priestess is doing the reading, they are channeling the cosmic downloads, the cosmic information that is imprinted in you at the time you came into the world, as a digital cosmic, imprint of life in you. That's what they're accessing. So there's 256 characters in that system, and those characters are called Odu. They're normally combinations of 16 major algorithm binary codes, and they are mostly reflecting light and dark. So in order for you to be able to read them and to interpret them, you have to have a lot of training and preparation to receive, the messages that come through that cosmic tray of knowledge, of vastness. That's basically what the technology is. It's very, very amazing.
Wow. That is so powerful. And again, like, so fascinating to hear that there's this whole other system that a lot of our culture is so unaware of, and how deep it is and how healing it could be for others. I'm sure you've already experienced with your clients all the healings that you've used with the Aluna Method. And so I just love to hear from you. And working with women and specifically, I feel like at least a lot of the women that we see, there's always a lot of healing that needs to be done in the womb space. We call this the sacral chakra. And I would love to hear if you have found that commonality of women coming to you, if they need a lot of healing in their womb space. And yeah, like how you go about healing that, and if you have noticed any commonalities and reoccurring issues that women are having.
It's interesting you asked that question, because yes, I have encountered lots of women that are, struggling with imbalances in their periods and their moon cycles, which, whenever a person hears, oh, she works with the moon, like all these women come to really learn about their periods, which is incredible. But I also kind of, through the Aluna Method, I also kind of tell people that it's not all about our periods. It's actually about our relationship with the moon, and how that relationship is guiding us deeper in every layer of our experience as, women, because we carry that possibility of life, that we have uteruses, and I'm talking with the womb what do you call womb having I would say womb having individuals that identify themselves as women. But we have that ability, if we choose so, to generate life. And that creates a whole nother layer of depth in that relationship with the moon itself. Our mother, and is our doula of life, death, and rebirth. So everything that connects to that understanding of like, how do I possess a full system in my body that is allowing for death, and rebirth to happen every month, to help actually to carve and to dismantle all of this crusty, indoctrinated patterns that we've been all carrying, right? Of pain, of oppression, of abuse, of trauma. All of that is dueling. Is dueling. How do you call this? Like when it's dull, when it's making it not shine.
Oh yeah, dull.
Yeah. Does that word exist in English? Like
Yeah,
when
totally.
dueling? Okay. It's dueling. Like it's all of those layers in our experience that are connecting us to that body of pain are preventing us from experiencing the life, the beauty, the full expression of presence that we are here to experience. So that connection with the moon and that understanding of life, death, and rebirth, it's a inherent aspect of who we are. We have a recycling factory inside of us. And if we use that with awareness, then we go through those layers of pain, of shame, of blame, of religious, oppressive concepts. And we say, wait a minute, you actually don't belong in here. You are here, and I've had you for a long time as if you were mine. But let me tell you, you are better outside. Let me, take you out of the room and put you where you belong. So my room has more space. I can breathe better in here. I am declogging my pantry. So I have, the specific things that I need that are very curated for my experience to be the best possible. For my this dish that I'm preparing, it's gonna be incredibly delicious, and I want the best ingredients, and I'm gonna curate that in my pantry, right? So that is what the moon does. She tells us you don't have to go straight into pain, straight into sorrow, straight into blame all the time. That is there because you are used to that. You have become accustomed to it. But, and I know that I'm not diminishing anyone's experience. Trauma is very real. We all experience it to certain degrees, some people more, some people less. What I'm saying is there are ways of dealing with that that are very gentle, which are your own ways. You don't have to follow anyone else's rules. You don't, the pain and say, I'm gonna do this, because that is like a very aggressive way of dealing with that trauma. Your own natural recycling, it's gonna help you in that process, and it comes in specific doses. Your nervous system can only handle what it can handle. If you are always anxious, if you are depressed, if you have any sort of whatchamacallit, the autoimmune disease, right? All of that is informing your nervous system, and there's only a certain capacity that it actually has to keep you functioning in a manner that it's not overwhelming, in a manner that it's not going to shut you down, right? That it keeps you at a certain pace in your life. So if you attune to that, what is that to you? That is the relationship with the moon. Dear moon, teach me when it's time for me to let go, when it's time for me to really go deep into what I need to, slowly, at my own pace, with my own understanding of where I can go. And then when I'm there, I release that little bit. And then the next time I do the same, I release that little bit. And the next thing you know, you have cleaned all of this space in like a couple of months. You're like, wow, this is different. it feels different up in here, you know? It's like when you walk into a room and it's crowded and you just like, oh, I don't want to deal with this. I know I have to do this, but nope. And you just go in the other direction. And then next month you walk back in there and you're like, whoo, you know, like now this time is like one little thing at a time. And when you less expect it, the space is there. So the work with the moon is about making space. And then the emergence of your power, of your shine, of your brightness is natural. It will just like start to beam out, you know, like you don't even have to do anything. You're just gonna sit there and people are gonna look at you and be like, dang girl, look at you. And you will feel it too. So yeah.
I was listening to something the other day and it said, you know, raising your vibration, like yes, you can focus on doing that, but really the raising the vibration comes from the release. It comes from letting go. And I think that it's such a common word or phrase used, but I think it's hard for people to understand, well, how do I let it go and how do I release things? And that's where people get caught up. And I think that modalities and techniques like you have from your Yoruba philosophy and passing those down, like these are the means of how we can actually release and let this go, because it is beyond just like you said, you had the awareness for it intellectually, you knew when you were going to therapy, but it's so different when you really feel it, when you really align with nature, and then when you set up your environment to be that optimal environment for healing, like that just takes it to a whole different level. And what I also love about you and the way that you express and how spirit expresses itself through you is that it's not only through these ancient traditions, which is, you know, we have the utmost reverence for, but you also have spirit speak through you in your body. And we love seeing all of your dance videos. So I love to hear, like, what is your perspective, like how is that your spiritual practice, and how can we explain that to a community that yes, you can have non-traditional practices that aren't just as spiritual.
Oh my God. You want to know something so good about this work is I am shedding so much shame. I am so liberated within myself. And I feel so expanded in that expression of liberation. So dancing, pole dancing, which is what I do, if in case you don't know, I am a pole dancer, very, very proudly. Um, Pole dancing has been one of the most incredible dance practices for me because it connects me to the strength in my body, right? My core strength is so necessary for me to do what I need to do on the pole. So my core is what supports my entire structure, and it makes me feel strong. And it also liberates me from that myth of like, oh yeah, women don't have upper body strength. What are you talking about? You haven't seen me on a pole. Like, I am completely capable in so many levels of like lifting whatever I need to lift because I've been training myself for that, and I am feeling empowered to, in my body. So that is a spiritual practice, to feel good, to feel joyful, to feel connected to your body, to feel free in your movement, to feel sensual and raw, and to feel um, almost like, there's this ambiguity about it that is very like mysterious. And that to me is captivating, right? When you're like, it's like you're floating. My friends they always come to my house and I give everyone pole lessons, right? I do circles in my house and I bring my friends and they're like, oh, okay, when is time for us to get on the pole? Whenever everyone is totally comfortable, when everyone's talking and having their best time, that's when it's time to go on the pole. Why? Because there's not that aspect of like, oh, this person's gonna judge me. Oh, this person's gonna look at me in a way. Oh, I'm ashamed of like not knowing, like, or looking goofy or whatever. And you know, a lot of us women, we express ourselves through that shame. we express ourselves through that blame and fear of judgment. And we put up this like barrier and this really um, impenetrable, wall that filters every interaction we have with the world, and kind of like it prevents us from experiencing that freedom that like, oh, it's fine if I look crazy doing this, it's completely fine. I really do not care. So whenever, my friends go in there, they're like, oh my God, this is so hard. You make it seem so easy. And I'm like, yeah, because again, it's about the practice of it. It's about training your body. And once you train your body, you really like, it's something, it exerts a lot of strength in you, but you could look like you're floating like, like a butterfly. So I love that ambiguous thing, you have to be really strong, but at the same time, you really are just soaring and floating and making it seem as if you're like almost like a spell is being casted in movement form. And I think that's what the feminine is. It's strong and sturdy, but at the same time completely fluid and floaty.
I literally was just about to say that. I was like, you are expressing, and I saw that already with pole dancing. I actually used to pole dance too. I love dancing in general, but I love pole
Mm,
dancing for that reason, because it's like that huge divine feminine aspect of so strong and internal, and you would never know it because she makes it look such ease and grace and
right.
all of that beauty. And it's like that is the total expression of the divine feminine. So I thought that was just like so fitting for you and who you are.
Yeah, no, I love it. I mean, please, if you haven't tried pole dancing, go ahead and do it. The first times are it's really hard, and I'm not gonna lie, you're gonna get bruised, and your hands are gonna hurt a little bit and whatever, but it really transforms the way you think about your body, because it's activating every single part of your body. Like, it's not only your arms, it's not only your core, it's not only your legs, it's everything all at once. I highly recommend it.
I haven't tried it. I've done chair dancing a few times, but I've been wanting to try the pole. Our friend Monica has beautiful videos too of her pole dancing, and every time I'm like, oh, I need to get in there and try it. So you've
Please.
re-inspired me.
Do it. It's amazing.
Our final question for you, and you've given us so many nuggets of wisdom, but if there's something really present in your life that's come as a lesson you've recently learned and want to share or impart some of that wisdom with our audience, we would be honored to hear that from you.
I'm in the process of re-evaluating things, the methodology and everything I'm doing is so wonderful. And I've been doing it for a whole year now. No, well, officially a whole year, but I've been doing it for like at least 5 years now. Um, but I like was doing it on a down low. Because spirit was like, you gotta do this. I'm like, yeah, I'm doing it. Meanwhile, no one knew about it. My friends are like, wait, can you do that thing with me? I'm like, sure. And then last year, when I moved back to New York, the ancestors were like, you're moving back to New York. I'm like, no, I'm not. They're like, oh yeah, you are. I'm like, oh, when? Like, and they're like, oh, in February. I'm like, February? I never go to New York City in February. Like, it's cold. No one wants that. And they're like, well, you are going. So get ready. And sure enough, all of the things in my life ended in February. Work contracts, apartment contracts, everything. And I'm like, okay, I guess it is. February it is. So I moved back and I arrived here and pandemic happened. And it was like, whoa, okay. And now I see that I had a whole year to really dive deep into this download thing I'm doing and bring it out into the world in a proper way and really honor it, right? Because that download thing was also me not honoring this gift that was given to me, like doubting my own, the divine in me through this methodology. So I'm in a process of in my life where I'm like, no more fear, no more doubt. And that doesn't mean that they don't come and they don't hit me. That just means every time they come and they hit me, I say, but I trust, but I trust. And that just makes me release a lot of that doubt, a lot of that fear, and it supports my expression of presence. It really gives me a whole new framework to work with, which is like, okay, if you trust, then what are you doing now? What are the next steps? How are you moving? How would you like to move? How does it feel good to move? Right? So I really, this is what I have to offer to people. Like, even when it looks like it's weird and it's off and you're trying to put things together, and then you have those moments of doubt and anxiety, you have an opportunity there to say, but I trust. you know and just that understanding really shifts the relationship between you and whatever it is that is about to manifest in your life. Really ask for, okay, if I trust, then show me what are the next steps. Show me how I have to move. Show me what are the people I have to connect with, right? Show me. And then, sure enough, those things start to show up and manifest. And the next thing you know is that you're in a whole new experience, just because you made that decision to say, but I trust.
I know both Angelica and I feel this so deeply. I think this is a collective lesson because I think this year's really been asking us to do that. And I love one of the things you said, which is like when the divine gives you gifts and wants you to recognize you as the divine and how it wants to express itself, like you have to honor that, right? And it's not that you lose your chance. I think it always comes back around, but I think it just flows with so much more ease when you accept this was the gift I was given and I'm going to honor it like the gift that it is and focus more on the vision of that gift rather than get stuck and lost in the fear and the doubt. So you so beautifully articulated that and I thank you for that. And I just want you to share, how can people find you, work with the Aluna Method, and just get to spend more time with you in the digital or in the physical space?
Oh, thank you so much. This was such a nice, beautiful conversation. I can be found on alunamethod.com. That's my website. You can, search for on-demand content there. I already have some courses that I've done that are up for sale there, where I teach you, this is a phase, we're going into phase 3 right now. I've already put phase 2, 1 and 2 there. In phase 3, it's about more of the ritualistic aspect of astrology. Phase 1 is more of the physical understanding of what your body is capable of doing. And then phase 2 is the moon system. So I teach you how to create your own lunar map. So once you get a gist of what that lunar map is, then you start to map your own cycles. And then you start to really get to know yourself. And you start to align with that, cyclical time, space, power. And then, we have phase 3, which are the rituals to support that power, that newfound power, new recognized power, because we're always acting out of power, either when we are using it for destruction or for to build. So yeah, that's where you can find me. You can also find me on Instagram, Juliana Luna, Juliana Luna, Luna, or at Aluna Method, which is also our Instagram handle. And shoot me an email if you are interested. I'm always down to collaborate with people, and yeah, I'm excited to work and serve more. I feel inspired by this conversation.
Well, you're already serving so deeply here. So we appreciate you so much for coming on the podcast today. And thank you so much, Luna, for being here.
Thank you.